हेलो व्हाट्सअप अबको कुनै एपिसोडहरू चाहिँ म एउटा किताब पढ्छु होइन अनि कतिवटा वर्डहरू चाहिँ मलाई राम्रोसँग प्रनाउन्स गर्न आउँदैन अनि बट आइल ट्राई द च्याप्टर 1 In an immense universe. In an immense universe, a little globe revolves around a star. It is the third in the row, Mercury, Venus, Earth, of the planetary family. It is of a solid core covered over most of its surface with liquid, and it has a gaseous envelope. Living creatures fill the liquid. Other living creatures fly in the gas, and still other creeps and walk upon the ground on the bottom of the gaseous ocean. Man, a being of erect stature, thinks himself the prince of creation. He felt like this long before he, by his own efforts, came to know how to fly on wings of metal around the globe. He felt godlike long before he could talk to his fellow man on the other side of the globe. Today, he can see the microcosm in a drop and the elements in the stars. He knows the laws governing the living cell with its chromosomes and laws governing the macrocosm of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. He assumes that gravitation keeps the planetary system together, man and beast on their planet, the sea within its borders. For millions and millions of years, he maintains, the planets have rolled along on the same paths and their moons around them, and man in those eons has arisen from a one-cell infusorium all the long way up to the ladder to his status of Homo sapiens. Is man's knowledge now nearly complete? Are only a few more steps necessary to conquer the universe, to extract the energy of the atom? Since these pages were written, this has already been done. To cure cancer, to control genetics, to communicate with other planets and learn if they have living creatures too. Here beings, Homo ignoramus. He does not know what life is, or how it came to be, and whether it originated from inorganic matters. He does not know whether other planets of this sun or of other suns have life on them, and if they have, whether the forms of life there are like those around us, ourselves included. He does not know how the solar system came into being, although he has built up a few hypotheses about it. He knows only that the solar system was constructed billions of years ago. He does not know what this mysterious force of gravitation is that holds him and his fellow man on the other side of the planet with their feet on the ground, although he regards the phenomenon itself as the law of laws. He does not know that the earth looks like 5 miles under his feet. He does not know what earth looks like 5 miles under his feet. He does not know how mountains came into existence or what caused the emergence of the continents, although he builds hypotheses around these. Nor does he know from where oil came, again hypothesis. He does not know why, only a short time ago, a thick classical sheet pressed upon the most of the Europe and North America, as he believes it did, nor how palms could grow above the polar circles, nor how it came about that the same fauna fill the inner lakes of the old and the new world. He does not know where the salt is. He does not know where the salt in the sea came from. Although man knows that he has lived on this planet for millions of years, he finds a recorded history of only a few thousand years, and even these few thousand years are not sufficiently well enough. Why did the Bronze Age precede the Iron Age? Even though iron is more widely distributed over the world and its manufacture is simpler than that of the alloy of copper and tin. By what mechanical means were structures of immense blocks built on the high mountains of the Andes? What caused the legend of the flood to originate in all the countries of the world? Is there any adequate meaning to the term antediluvian? From what experiences grew the eschatological pictures of the end of the world? In this work, of which the present book is the first part, some of these questions will be answered, but only at the cost of giving up certain notions now regarded as sacred laws in science, the millions of years of the present constitution of the solar system, and the harmonies of revolution of the earth, with all their implications as regards the theory of evolution. The celestial harmony. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The day consists of 24 hours. The year consists of 365 days, 5 hours, and 49 minutes. The moon circles around the earth, exchanging its phases crescent, full, decrescent. The terrestrial axis points in the direction of the polar star. After winter comes spring, then summer and fall. These are common facts. Are they invariable laws? Must it be so forever? Was it so always? The Sun has 9 planets. Mercury has no satellites. Venus has no satellites. The Earth has a moon. Mars has 2 small trabants, mere pieces of rock, and one of them completes its month before Mars ends its day. Jupiter has 11 moons and 11 different kind of months to count. Saturn has 9 moons. Uranus has 5 moons. Neptune 1. Pluto none. Was it always so? Will it be forever? यो बुक चाहिँ 1950 मा लेखेको है। त्यही भएर अहिलेको टाइमसँग it might not match certain facts. The sun rotates in an easterly direction. All planets revolve in their orbits in the same direction, counterclockwise if seen from the north around the sun. Most of their moons revolve counterclockwise in direct motion, but there are a few that revolves in the opposite direction, in retrograde motion. No orbit is an exact circle. There is no regularity in the eccentrical shapes of the planetary orbits. Each elliptical curve verges in a different direction. It is not known for certain, but it is assumed that Mercury permanently shows the same face to the Sun as our moon does with respect to the Earth. Information obtained by different methods of observation of Venus is contradictory. It is not known whether Venus rotates so slowly that its day equals its year, or so rapidly that the night side is never sufficiently cooled. Mars rotates in 24 hours, 37 minutes, 22.6 seconds mean period, a period comparable to the terrestrial day. Jupiter, which in volume is 1300 times larger than the Earth, completes a rotation in the short space of 9 hours and 50 minutes. What causes this variability? It is not a law that a planet must rotate or have days and nights. Still, less that its day and night must return every 24 hours. If Pluto rotates from east to west, it has the sun rising in the west. Uranus has the sun rising and setting neither in the east nor in the west. So it is not a law that a planet of a solar system must rotate from the west to the east and that the sun must rise in the east. The equator of the Earth is inclined to the plane of its ecliptic at an angle of 23 and 1.5 degree. This causes the change of seasons during the annual revolution around the sun. The axes of other planets point in the directions of seemingly deliberate choice. It is not a general law for all planets that winter must follow fall and summer the spring. The axis of Uranus is placed almost in the plane of its orbit. For about 20 years, one of its polar regions is the hottest place on the planet. Then night gradually descends and 20 years later the other pole enters the tropics for an equal length of time. The moon has no atmosphere. It is not known whether Mercury has any atmosphere. Venus is covered with dense cloud, but not of water vapor. Mars has a transparent atmosphere, but almost without oxygen or water vapor, and its composition is unknown. Jupiter and Saturn has gaseous envelopes. It is not known whether they have solid cores. It is not a general law that a planet must have atmosphere or water. Mars is 0.15 of the volume of the Earth. The next planet, Jupiter, is about 8,750 times as large as Mars. There is no regularity of or relation between the size of the planets and their position in the system. On Mars are seen canals and polar caps. On the Moon, craters. The Earth has reflecting oceans. Venus has brilliant clouds. Jupiter has belts and a red spot. Saturn has rings. The celestial harmony is composed of bodies different in size, different in form, different in velocity of rotation, with differently directed axes of rotation, with different directions of rotation, with differently composed atmospheres or without atmospheres, with a varying number of moons or without moons, and with satellites revolving in either direction. It appears then to be by chance that the Earth has a moon, that we have day and night, and that their combined length is equal to 24 hours, that we have a sequence of seasons, that we have oceans and water, atmosphere and oxygen, and probably also our planet is placed between Venus at our left and Mars at our right. The origin of planetary system. All theories of the origin of the planetary system and the motive forces that sustain the motion of its members go back to the gravitational theory and the celestial mechanics of Newton. The sun attracts the planets, and if we were not for a second Earth, and if it were not for a second Earth, they would fall into the sun. But its planet is impelled by its momentum to proceed in a direction away from the sun, and as a result, an orbit is formed. Similarly, a satellite or a moon is subject to an Earth that drives it away from its primary, but the attraction of the primary bends the path on which the satellite would have proceeded if there had been no attraction between the bodies, and out of these Earths a satellite orbit is traced. The inertia or persistence of motion implanted in planets and satellites was postulated by Newton, but he did not explain how or when the initial pull or push occurred. The theory of the origin of the planetary system was dominated. The theory of the origin of the planetary system, which dominated the entire 19th century, was proposed by Swedenborg, the theologian, and Kant, the philosopher. It was put into scientific terms by Laplace, although not explored by him quantitatively, and in brief is as follows. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the sun was nebulous and very large and had a form approaching that of a disk. This disk was as wide as the whole orbit of the farthest of the planets. It rotated around its center. Owing to the process of compression caused by gravitation, a globular sun set itself in the center of the disk. Because of the rotating motion of the whole nebula, a centrifugal force was in action. Parts of matter more on the periphery resisted the retraction action directed toward the center and broke up into rings, which balled into globes. These were the planets in the process of shaping. In other words, as a result of the shrinkage of the rotating sun, matter broke away and portions of this solar material developed into planets. The plane in which the planets revolve is the equatorial plane of the sun. This theory is now regarded as unsatisfactory. 3 objects stand out above others. First, the velocity of the axial rotation of the sun at the time the planetary system was built could not have been sufficient to enable bands of matter to break away. But even if they had broken away, they would not have balled into globes. Second, the Laplace theory does not explain why the planets have larger angular velocity of daily rotation and yearly revolution than the sun could have imparted to them. Third, what made some of the satellites revolve retrogradely or in a direction opposite to that of most of the members of the solar system? It appears to be clearly established that whatever structure we assign to a primitive sun, a planetary system cannot come into being merely as the result of the sun's rotation. If a sun rotating alone in space is not able of itself to produce its family of planets and satellites, it becomes necessary to invoke the presence and assistance of some second body. That brings us at once to the tidal theory. The tidal theory, which in its earlier stage was called planetesimal theory, assumes that a star passed close to the sun. An immense tide of matter arose from the sun in the direction of the passing star and was torn from the body of the sun, but remained in its Spotzi को पेज से ब्लैंक रहेगा है अब सिधै उसमा पढ्दिउँ है पेज 10 Planetary systems form at the rate of about 1 per 5 billion years. Our own system, with an age of the order of 2 billion years, is probably the youngest system in the whole galactic system of stars. The nebular and tidal theories alike regard the planets as derivatives of the sun and the satellites as derivatives of the planets. The problem of the origin of the moon can be regarded as disturbing to the tidal theory, but being smaller than the Earth, the moon completed earlier the process of cooling and shrinking, and the lunar volcanoes had already ceased to be active. It is calculated that the moon possesses a lighter specific weight than the Earth. It is assumed that the moon was produced from the superficial layers of the Earth's body, which are rich in light silicon, whereas the core of the Earth, the main portion of its body, is made of heavy metals, particularly iron. But this assumption postulates the origin of the moon as not simultaneous with the origin of the Earth being formed out of a mass ejected from the sun had to undergo a process of leveling, which placed the heavy metals in the core and silicon at the periphery, before the moon parted from the Earth by a new tidal destruction. This would mean 2 consecutive tidal distortions in a system where the chance of even one is held extremely rare. If the passing of one star near another happens among 100 million stars once in 5 billion years, 2 occurrences like this for one and the same star seem quite incredible. Therefore, as no better explanation is available, the satellites are supposed to have been torn from the planets by the sun's attraction on their first perihelion passage, when sweeping along on stretched orbits, the planets came close to the sun. I don't know whatever the fuck this means. The circling of the satellites around the planets also confronts existing cosmological theories with difficulties. Laplace built this theory on the origin of the solar system on the assumption that all planets and satellites revolve in the same direction. He wrote that the axial rotation of the sun and the orbital revolutions and axial rotations of the 6 planets, the moon, the satellites, and the rings of Saturn present 43 movements, all in the same direction, only finds by the analysis of the probabilities that there are more than 4,000 billion chances to 1 that this arrangement is not the result of chance. This probability is considerably higher than that of the reality of historical events with regard to which no one would venture a doubt. He deduced that a common and prime cause directed the movements of the planets and satellites. He deduced that a common and primal cause directed the movements of the planets and satellites. Since the time of Laplace, new members of the solar system have been discovered. Now we know that though the majority of the satellites revolve in the same direction as the planets revolve and the sun rotates, the moons of Uranus revolve in a plane at almost perpendicular to the orbital plane of their planet, and 3 of the 11 moons of Jupiter, 1 of the 9 moons of Saturn, and the 1 moon of Neptune revolve retrogradely. These facts contradict the main argument of the Laplace theory. A rotating nebula could not produce satellites revolving in 2 directions. In the tidal theory, the direction of the planet's movements depended on the star that passed. It passed in the plane in which the planets now revolve, and in a direction which determined their circling from west to east. But why should the satellites of Uranus revolve perpendicularly to that plane and some moons of Jupiter and Saturn in reverse direction? This the tidal theory fails to explain. According to all existing theories, the angular velocity of the revolution of a satellite must be slower than the velocity of revolution of its parent. But the inner satellite of Mars revolves more rapidly than Mars rotates. Some of the difficulties that confront the nebular and tidal theories also confront another theory that has been proposed in recent years. According to it, Sun is supposed to have been a member of a double star system. A passing star crushed the companion of the Sun, and out of its debris planets were formed. In further development of this hypothesis, it is maintained that the larger planets were built out of the debris and the smaller ones, the so-called terrestrial planets, were formed from the larger ones by a process of cleavage. The birth of smaller solid planets out of the larger gaseous ones is conjectured in order to explain the difference in the relation of weight to volume in the larger and smaller planets. But this theory is unable to explain the difference in the specific weights of the smaller planets and their satellites. By a process of cleavage, the moon was born of the earth. But since the specific weight of the moon is greater than that of the larger planets and smaller than that of the earth, it would seem to be more in accord with the theory that the earth was born of the moon, despite its smallness. This confuses the argument. The origin of the planets and their satellites remains unsolved. The theories not only contradict one another, but each of them bears within itself its own contradictions. If the sun had been unattended by planets, its origin and evolution would have presented no difficulty. The origin of the comets. The nebular and tidal theories endeavor to explain the origin of the solar system, but do not include the comets in their schemes. Comets are more numerous than planets. More than 60 comets are known to belong definitely to the solar system. These are the comets of short periods less than 80 years. They revolve in stretched ellipses, and all but one do not go beyond the line marked by the orbit of the Neptune. It is estimated that besides the comets of short period, several 100,000 comets visit the solar system. However, it is not known for certain that they return periodically. Fucking kill them. Periodically. Periodically. They are seen presently at an approximate rate of 500 in a century, and are said to have an average period of tens of thousands of years. A few theories of the origin of comets have been proposed, but aside from one attempt to see in them planetesimals that did not receive a side pole sufficiently strong to bring them into circular orbits, no scheme has been developed that explains the origin of the solar system in its entirety, with its planets and comets. Yet no cosmic theory can persist which limits itself to the problem of either planets or comets exclusively. One theory sees in the comets errant cosmic bodies arriving from interstellar space. After approaching the sun, they turn away on an open parabolic curve. But if they happen to pass close to one of the larger planets, they may be compelled to change their open curves to ellipses and become comets of short period. This is the theory of capture. Comets of long periods or of no period are dislodged from their paths to become short period comets. What the origin of the long period comets is remains an unanswered question. The short period comets apparently have some relation to the larger planets. About 50 comets move between the Sun and the orbit of Jupiter. Their periods are under 9 years. 4 comets reach the orbit of Saturn. 2 comets revolve inside the circle described by Uranus, and 9 comets with an average period of 71 years move within the orbit of Neptune. This comprises the system of the short period comets as it is known at present. To the last group belongs the Halley comet, which among the comets of short periods has the longest period of revolution, about 76 years. Then there is a great gap, after which there are comets that require thousands of years before they return to the Sun, if they return at all. The distribution of the short period comets suggested the idea that they were captured by the large planets. This theory has for its support the direct observation that comets are disturbed on their paths by the planets. Another theory of the comets supposes their origin to have been in the Sun, but in a matter unlike that conceived of in the tidal theory of the origin of the planets. Mighty reels on the surface of the sun sweep ignited gases into great protuberances. These are observed daily. Matter is driven off from the sun and returns to the sun. It is calculated that if the velocity of the ejection were to exceed 384 miles per second, the speed of motion in a parabola, the matter would not return to the sun but would become a long-range comet. I don't really understand all this thing तर मजा आइरहेछ पढ्नु चाहिँ. Then the path of the ejected mass might become perturbed as a result of its passes near one of the larger planets, and the comet would become one of the short period. Birth of a comet in this manner has never been observed, and the probability that matter in explosion may reach a speed of 384 miles per second is highly questionable. It was therefore supposed alternatively that millions of years ago, when the activity of their gaseous masses was more dynamic, the large planets expelled comets from their bodies. The speed required for the ejected mass to overcome the gravitational pull of the ejecting body is less in the case of planets than in the case of the sun, owing to the smaller gravitational pull. It is calculated that a mass hurled from Jupiter at a speed of about 38 miles per second, or at only a little more than a third of this velocity, in the case of Neptune, would become expelled. This variant of the theory neglects the question of the origin of the long-period comets. However, an explanation was offered, according to which the large planets throw the comets that pass close to them from their short orbits into elongated ones, or even expel them entirely from the solar system. When passing close to the sun, comets emit tails. It is assumed that the material of the tail does not return to the comet's head but is dispersed in space. Consequently, the comets as luminous bodies must have a limited life. If Halley's comet has pursued its present orbit since late Precambrian times, it must have grown and lost 8 million tails, which seems improbable. If comets are wasted, their numbers in the solar system must permanently diminish, and no comet of short period could have preserved its tail since geological times. But as there are many luminous comets of short period, they must have been produced or acquired at some time when other members of the system, the planets and the satellites, were already in their places. A theory has been offered that once the solar system moved through a nebula and obtained its comet there. The theory has been offered that once the solar system moved through a nebula and obtained its comet there. Did the sun emit planets by shrinkage or by tide, and comets by explosion? Did the comets come from interstellar space, and were they captured into the solar system by larger planets? Did the larger planets produce the smaller planets by cleavage, or did they expel the short-period comets from their bodies? It is admitted that we cannot know the truth about the origin of the planetary and cometary systems billions of years ago. The problem of the origin and the development of the solar system suffers from the label speculative. It is frequently said that as we were not there when the system was formed, we cannot legitimately acquire at any idea of how it was formed. The most we can do, it is believed, is to investigate one planet, the other under our feet, in order to learn its past and then, by the deductive method, to apply the results to other members of the solar system. Chapter 2: The Planet Earth. The planet Earth has a stony shell, the lithosphere. It consists of igneous rock like granite and basalt, with sedimentary rock on the top. The igneous rock, is that ingenious? Or is that IGNEOUS, igneous? The igneous rock is the original crust of the earth. Sedimentary rock is deposited by water. The inner composition of the earth is not known. The propagation of seismic waves gives support to the assumption that the shell of the earth is over 2,000 miles thick on the basis of the gravitational effect of mountain masses, the theory of isostasy. The shell is estimated to be only 60 miles thick. The presence of iron in the shell or the migration of heavy metals from the core of the shell has not been sufficiently explained. For these metals to have left the core, they must have been ejected by explosions, and in order to remain spread through the crust, the explosions must have been followed immediately by cooling. If in the beginning the planet was a hot conglomerate of elements, as the nebular as well as the tidal theories assume, then the iron of the globe should have become oxidized and combined with all available oxygen. But for some unknown reason, this did not take place. Thus, the presence of oxygen in the terrestrial atmosphere is unexplained. The water of the oceans contains a large amount of soluble sodium chloride, common salt. Sodium might have come from the rocks eroded by rain, but rocks are poor in chlorine, and the proportion of sodium and chlorine in water of the sea calls for 50 times more chlorine in the igneous rock than it actually contains. यस्तो टाइपको किताबहरूलाई चाहिँ I think it's called destructuralization or deconstructive criticism or something like that. It has something to do with deconstruction. The deep strata of igneous rock contains no signs of fossil life. Encased in sedimentary rock are skeletons of marine and land animals, often in many layers one upon the other. Not infrequently, igneous rock is found protruding into sedimentary rock or even covering it over large areas, pointing to successive eruptions of igneous rock that became heated and molten after there was life on the earth. Upon strata which show no signals of fossil life are strata containing cells, and sometimes the cells are so numerous as to constitute the entire mass of the rock. They are often found in the hardest rock. Higher strata contain skeletons of land animals, often of extinct species, and not infrequently above the strata with the remains of land animals, and other strata with marine fauna. The species of the animals and even the genera change with the strata. The strata often assume an oblique position, sometimes being almost vertical. Frequently, they are faulted and overturned in many ways. Cuvier, ओके के हो त्यस्तै हो के नाम है 1769 to 1832 is a person. The founder of vertebrate paleontology. The founder of vertebrate paleontology, or the science of petrified skeletons of animals possessing vertebrate from fish to man, was much impressed by the picture presented by the sequence of the layers of the earth. When the traveler passes over the fertile plains where gently flowing streams nourish in their course an abundant vegetation, and where the soil, inhabited by a numerous population, adorned with flourishing villages, opulent cities, and suburb monuments, is never disturbed except by the ravages of war or by the oppression of the powerful, he is not late to suspect that nature also has had her intestine wars, and that the surface of the globe has been broken up by revolutions and catastrophe. But his ideas changes as soon as he digs into the soil, which now presents so peaceful an aspect. Cuvier, let's call this guy Cuvier, thought that great catastrophes had taken place on this earth, repeatedly changing sea beds into continents and continents into sea beds. He held that genera and species were unchangeable since creation, but observing different animal remains in various levels of earth, he concluded that catastrophes must have annihilated life in vast areas, leaving the ground for other forms of life. Where did these other genera come from? Either they were newly created, or more likely they migrated from other parts of the world which were not at that time also visited by cataclysm. He could not find the causes of this cataclysm. He saw in their traces the problem in genealogy. It is of most importance to solve, but he realizes that in order to resolve it satisfactorily, it would be necessary to discover the cause of these events, an undertaking which presents a difficulty of quite a different kind. He knew only of many fruitless attempts already made, and he did not find himself able to offer a solution. These ideas have haunted, I may almost say, have tormented me during my research among fossil bones. That's what Cuvier or somebody like that said. म बाँकी चाहिँ एकछिनमा पढ्छु है.